The following podcast contains some strong language and adult themes. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Enjoy. Go. We're just debating on who's going to start. 3, 2, 1, go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast on podcast.net. I am your host, Drew, and I've got my co-host, Ed, here. Ed's great. You know, a lot of people think my name's Ed, but it's actually Drew. And even if we both have the same name, two Eds are better than one.
Because do you remember that from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? The end song is, 2 heads are better than one. It's twice the action, 2 times the fun. And that sounds, now that I've said that, very pornographic, and I apologize to anyone listening. That is not where I was going with that conversation, especially me. And our guest knows, who's not going to pop on yet. But this individual, unfortunately, maybe we'll tell that story on the podcast of how embarrassing that typo was that I sent to 2 lovely women. It was horrific on my side. Very embarrassing. How you doing,
Can I
Ed?
just say how proud I'm doing well, Drew. Thank you so much for asking. It's been a great few days. Didn't have to reschedule, no stress or anything like that, which is all bullshit. But the how proud of you I am. That was the first time I think on the pod or ever in our life that you actually said the lyrics to the song rather than like do 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 do. So this is already the best podcast we've ever done.
I mean, I could have sang it. I mean, I could have not sang it and just been like, boo, doo, ba ba.
Boom. What is that called? Scat, right?
Which is, yeah, it is scat. Yep. Ella Fitzgerald did some of that stuff. If you like the jazz.
The first lady. No,
yeah,
it always sounds like Ella Fitzgerald sounds like a president.
I would argue she's probably one of the premier jazz musicians on the planet.
Yeah, she's really good.
Speaking of premier jazz musicians, let's introduce our guest. That was like the worst cold open push we've done. It's
Juilliard trained.
Yeah, is that all true? No, I know that. I did some digging, but not too much because I don't want to know. So, Rachel, I'm going to let you introduce yourself beyond your first name. You can say whatever you want. You can make up a last name. We don't really care. But I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us just a small portion about you. Let's start with this. Rachel, your name and what you do for a living. How about we go with that?
Okay. I'm Rachel Smith. Last name Smith, and that's real. I mean, I know some people use that as like a kind of fake name, but it's my real name. And I'm an accountant. So I'm like a contractual controller / CFO for multiple clients.
There we go.
So like Rachel, and just my first question. So like Rachel, if there were like major brands out there looking at investing and sponsoring a podcast, what would you say as an accountant would be the best podcast to sponsor?
I'll have to think about this. I don't know.
Really?
There's this one I've been
Thanks for joining, everyone.
This one more good thing, because everyone needs one more good thing in life, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's important. That's the name. Let's. So I barely know you. In transparency, Ed knows you. Digitally, we all know each other. The world's a lot smaller thanks to technology and such. But I barely know you. So some of these questions Ed may know answers to, and Ed, feel free to elaborate in and like ask more on as we go through it. But like one of my things was I just like to know your story. Now there's this other guy that exists out there that he would just be like, tell me your story. Right? That's Ed's hero, the great white underbelly guy. But I find that sometimes gets really
soft.
Overwhelming.
You just mixed. The show is called Soft.
The great.
You mixed the podcast name with the Great White Shark. That's our name.
The band Great White. Don't you know the band Great White? You don't know them either?
No. I do know the shark though.
Okay. Oh, you're friends with him. on TikTok?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I disappointed you, okay? Guys, I am on top of the world right now because I finally quit sweating.
I thought like he was gonna break out in the shark, like baby shark song or something.
Oh, that would have been amazing.
Yeah, here he goes.
Baby.
Don't do it.
We'll end it with that.
We love your talent, but let's reserve that one.
Which one? Which of my talents?
I would say elbow being famous. That's huge.
Oh, here we
Your
go.
talent of not recognizing famous actors that are very famous.
Yeah, that's one of them.
You sing really good and you entertain, though. That's for sure.
So Rachel, I'm gonna Drew a little bit. I'm gonna get us back on Drew. We're gonna say back on Drew because back on Drew means back on track. Rachel, tell us what's your story?
My story. What details do you want of my story? Well, I was born in.
Okay, let's start this. Let me start with this. You reside in Florida currently, correct? You're in the north south because the where you are in Florida is considered the north, even though it's the most south. I know, but that's Yankee. That's still a Yankee area. That's for Yankees. Okay. You're out of the South, right? It's a southern state, but that's not southern. But you're originally from the north. So where are you originally from? Because you're from like the Midwest or something. Based on your accent, that's what I'm going with. I might be wrong, but I assume.
Yes. I'm originally from Indiana, like in the little corner, not too far from Chicago. Right on the tip of Lake Michigan. That's where I'm originally from. Now, I was an Army brat and lived in multiple states, but most of my life was in Indiana.
So where else did you live?
South Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana, Kentucky. Yeah, a lot of them.
What part? So where were you in Alabama? Were you in Huntsville?
No. I was in 3rd grade. I don't necessarily remember. I feel like it was right outside of Birmingham.
Oh, 3rd grade Alabama? Yeah, I've I'm sorry. I was in, do you see what I'm so sorry, Rachel. How was 3rd grade?
Don't care. Oh, yeah. I didn't live there long. It was just like 1 year. So 80% was in Indiana, pretty much.
So was it like a small town?
It was a weird town. That's all I could say. It was kind of a small town. I mean, there was definitely a lot of like fields, not very populated. We used to watch like parachuters go into the field below us every single day at a certain time. We lived like almost like on the side of like a mountain, like almost. It was very interesting. I recommend don't ride your bike down that street because I learned that lesson the hard way when I was little. But it was just.
Wait, what is that? Hold on.
It wasn't
Hold
very
on.
populated.
We got to unpack a few things. There's some weird sentences that just occurred. One, there were parachuters every day that fell into like, what does that mean? Is it like military training? Is that you were on the base there?
No. My dad was not in the Army when I was in Alabama. He was in trucking at that time. That wasn't a military one. South Carolina, Louisiana were the main military, like Army bases.
But wait, where were the parachuters? In Indiana?
That was in Alabama.
In Alabama?
Uh-huh.
Do they, what, like, I have no idea what that means now because I was thinking it's like, oh, paratroopers or training or whatever. She's like, no, it was just, that was 3rd grade life. There were parachuters everywhere.
It's my 3rd grade jam for sure. No, we lived on this huge hill and down below was a very large field and they did like these skydiving kind of things and we watched the parachuters fall every single day at like certain times off the back deck in our house.
Freaking awesome.
It's cool, yeah. It was very interesting. And that's like my biggest memory of that house and when we lived in Alabama.
Except for the bike road, because you're talking about something about don't ride your bike down the road. Why is that?
Oh yeah. I lived in a cul-de-sac, so there was only like 5 or 6 houses, but the street was so steep. It was disgustingly steep. And I thought I could be a badass and ride my bike down the hill because I was like, man, you'll go so fast. it didn't work out very well because it was like to a tree. Yeah, so I stopped the
Let's
stuff.
take that. That was a very what did it sound like when that happened again? Just full
Oh,
disclosure here, Rachel has been giving me so much. I love Rachel so much, and Rachel gives me more crap in the best of ways than anybody I've met, and nobody could Rachel like Rachel does.
very
And
true.
it's just, this is really cool that we're here and we're talking about this and learning about parachute backyards, and
Yeah,
who would have thought?
I got to make sure I don't give Ed any ammo in this whole conversation.
Yeah, no. Listen, I learned my lesson. I screwed up one time, just one time, and now I'm paying the price. I mean, they have all these nicknames for me that revolve around the relationship of me and a dildo. It's really just, it's quite tragic. So I just don't, you just can't mess with her, man. She's too quick at it. She's too quick at firing back. She's like a gunslinger. She really is.
Well,
Um,
I'm very tiny, so I always say dynamite comes in small packages, and I'm not joking.
um, hmm, hmm.
I mean, you could raise your hand right now if you needed to. I mean,
I
it's
was-
appropriate. Anybody that
Hey.
knows that inside joke, welcome to the club. Um, so let me ask this. So all right, so then you grow up primarily in Indiana. What is it like growing up in the corner of Indiana? Are you a suburb of Chicago, or like are you detached enough that Chicago's like a little bit of a journey?
Chicago, it was like an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So we stayed, out of Chicago most of the time. You only went there if you were going to like a museum or a game, baseball game, football game. Um, and of course you knew some people that rode the train in for work, but overall, no, we stayed put in our little, I always say little town, but I think it's a little town compared to where I live now. Obviously, South Florida is overpopulated and crazy. But it wasn't too small. It was still the chance of going to the grocery store and seeing someone you know, and I don't have that here. So it was somewhat of a small town.
Was it part of that like Americana vibe where I mean during the 4th of July were the streets lined with American flags and um do you like and summers were these very romantic visions that I have in my brain of children playing tire swings and ice cream. Did that exist? That's how the Midwest in my brain is.
I mean, you got some of it right. I mean, all the kids kind of played together. We rode our bikes together. A lot of people did have the American flag on their house. Um, and I don't know, it was such a different world than where I live now and just the way times are now. Um, but yeah, you kind of pinned it. And if there was like, we had like a county fair every year and that was huge. It's grown a lot actually. That's the fair that Jelly Roll just performed at in Porter County. That's where I'm from.
Hey.
But it was like, you always did the, you know, traditions every year. Like, oh, there's a 4th of July parade on Central Avenue in Portage, or, the fair. And it was just kind of the things that you do every single year, like routine.
Hmm.
I remember those fairs too, and it's funny. Like going to those fairs, you went through these phases. It felt like in life. So obviously, a little bit younger, you're going to ride the rides and stuff, and then at some point, you're not going because it's not cool to maybe go. I feel like, and then you're going not to enjoy it, just to be cool, just so people,
Hmm.
it's like, oh yeah, are you going to the fair today? I might dabble in some fairage later. I might consider that. I might swoop through. I might get all ready, pop a collar or two, and make an appearance. And uh yeah. Hmm.
There
The
was a
good old
time where we
days.
begged our parents to drop us off because we didn't want to be seen with our parents. You were teens, and as a girl, you're like, oh, the cute boys are going, or whatever. So it definitely changes. Now, fast forward to now, obviously, I have a son, and he loves to go back home because it's very different. He can ride go-karts and do all these things that in South Florida there's not the land to do all those things, all those outdoor activities. So we go there now and he loves it. It's so different. He even told me yesterday, I miss Indiana, like, when can we go visit grandma and grandpa? And I've taken him to the fair and he just thought it was the coolest thing. And like down here, the fairs aren't necessarily the place to go. It's not that small town kind of, I mean, and it's like I said, it's not too small of a town, but it feels like that from where we live now. And my son was born and raised here, so that's all he knows. So I got to show him like, hey, this is what I did when I was a kid and what I loved that tradition. So
What so you go from your Midwest in Indiana and then juxtaposing that against South Florida, that's an epic contrast. So
mhm,
obviously there's a big story in the middle there, right?
yeah, there is.
So didn't you live overseas? Not overseas. Did you live in another country for a while? Did I misunderstand that? No. I
No.
thought you lived in Canada for some reason. Maybe that's
No.
another you that I found. I found someone using your identity, by the way, then.
Uh, Well, they got more money than me. Can they pay off some debt and stuff? I mean, that would be great.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah,
maybe it was
nobody steals your identity. Maybe that's that. Nobody Robin Hood's identities. It's like they steal it and they pay down all your
Right.
debt and then give it back, and it's like, here, you're a better, more
I mean,
financially stable person.
no,
That sounds like the greatest
no,
show ever created. Think how good that would be content wise if you made a TV show and that's what you did. You just like borrowed someone's identity, paid down all their bills. They didn't know it. So it's like completely unknown random acts of kindness that you just go do that kind of thing. It would be amazing.
that would be cool.
All right. So
So,
you grow up there. Where do you go to? Go ahead, Ed.
oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking it's like, so I guess to do it, we would have to steal money from like corporate America and big banks to do it. Because I mean, we don't have the money. So watch out,
You don't have to steal.
Citibank.
They could sponsor it, but they could sponsor
Oh
you.
yeah.
They could literally sponsor you. And that's more altruistic, right? Take some of these profits and now it just goes through. I mean, think how good that would look for that corporation, but at the same time, they're really helping somebody. Not saying that not giving charitable organizations is awesome, but imagine the impact if you I don't know. I'm a big believer in if you can make a small change in someone's life, you can it actually has a very big snowball effect that we often don't get to see. And so if you make that small change, you might see a bigger rollout from it.
Yeah, but the
That's
unfortunate part is
crazy.
the people that are capable to do that are the greedy ones that don't think of helping others, and the people that can't necessarily do it are the ones that would love to. That's the problem,
Maybe we just don't get to hear about it.
right? True.
There's always a little bit of it that's like how much of it is slightly needs to be how much of altruism needs to be driven by it's a question. How much of altruism should be driven by a little bit of ego? So that because
Mhm.
if we were to say um I that's not right. That would make it exactly my point. So me telling the story is going to make my point. For example, I often buy people's groceries randomly. I just randomly buy people's groceries, whether they're next to me, in front of me. I've multiple times at Costco. I just do it, right? I don't tell them who paid for it if I can avoid it. If I can dodge it with them knowing, not me telling you the story satisfies some weird ego thing that makes me feel good about doing it. But if I didn't tell you that, the only person that could tell you that story was the people I directly impacted around me if I kept my mouth shut. So I'm wondering if
Right.
maybe there's a bunch of people out there doing like, maybe there is, and there's like a super secret billionaires awesome club that we never get to know about, and they only tell each other. It's like Fight Club, but really positive.
I mean,
They like
well,
show up like with the it's like the out they show up it's like, hey, how much are we gonna hey I don't know why I feel like that's the, hey, you want to go
we
help
are-
some people today.
So what we got to do is get you to be the accountant of the Fight Club so we can break the story right here on this very podcast.
I'm down. Let's go. Let's go. My
All
hourly
right,
rate
so
might increase a lot, but
so all right, so you grow up there, then you go to college. So where'd you end up going to college?
Florida Atlantic University. That's not why I moved to Florida, but that's where I went to school.
Now where's that? That's in Central Florida, right?
It's in Boca Raton, Florida.
Okay. So you now, if this is too personal, I used to say this when I would ask a girl out and I thought they would say no, but I would take the risk anyway. I would just say, look, if you're not interested, just say you have to wash your hair. That was my way out. And so I had a lot of girls that washed their hair. They washed a lot of hair. These girls around me, they must have washed their dirty hair. All right.
I'm using that now for sure. Thank
So,
you for more ammo, Drew.
it's all right. I have no shame.
Wait a second. So okay, correct me if I'm wrong, and I think I'm wrong here. I thought like when girls were interested, I didn't know if I didn't know what time period of your life. I thought you were talking like third grade, like girls would come up to you. It's like, hey, Drew, I'm interested in being your partner. And you're like, I'm sorry, I got to go wash my hair.
They're not me. I would say it to them. I'm like in college.
You
If I
would tell
needed
them to go wash their hair?
No. I would say,
Oh my
look,
God, I lost
I'm
it.
going to ask you out. If you're not interested, you don't have to say no. You can just say you got to wash your hair. And so I went up to this young lady. She played soccer way out of my league, and I walked up to her and I was like, "Hey, would you like to go out?" I was like, "But before you answer, if you're not interested, just say you got to wash your hair." And she goes, "I have to wash my hair," and I just turned around and walked away. I didn't say anything. And then she was like, "Hey, wait," and I was like, "Too late," and I just kept going. Sneaky.
That's
pro tip for all those
interesting.
dudes out there that aren't on Tinder. All right, so my question was, before we talked about washing your hair, did you decide to go to Florida Atlantic because you wanted to get space from Indiana, like, and have something new, or did you go there for a very, like, what's the reason you went to Florida Atlantic?
I had already lived here. That's pretty much the reason. There was no dream of going there. I knew I wanted to go to college. I moved here, I was only 19, and that was the local school college, and that's kind of why I went. I already resided in Florida. Um, I moved here for other reasons, and I was here by myself, and that was the closest one, so that's where I went. I mean, it's a good school too. I mean, it's nothing bad, but it's not like I dreamed of going to Florida Atlantic forever. No, it's just I moved to Florida, and that's where it was.
So I think Ed and I both heard a sentence in there that I can see on his face. He wants to ask you, as do I, what does other reasons mean? Is that fair? Before you answer, Ed, is that what you're thinking, or were you thinking about Pokemon cards?
Kind of. A little bit of both. I was thinking about the new Charizard EX Obsidian Flames. The new Pokemon set was released yesterday, and my Target locally accidentally dropped them the day before, and then I got held at the line, and they wouldn't allow me to buy them, and I was like, it created a whole thing. So I was thinking about all of it all at the same time.
So we had to
we want to know
unpack
that. Yeah, of course.
Okay. I mean, it was a big portion of my life, so it's okay. I obviously I'm in the state of Florida by myself, so none of my family's here, nobody. But when I was in, I want to say sixth grade, I started dating a boy, and I actually stayed with that same boy till I was early 20s.
Oh wow!
His mom lived down here. We grew up obviously in Indiana together. Um, his mom lived down here, and we were off and on. He was not the best. I mean, he's a good person, but there was issues there. Um, but his mom lived down here, so he used to come here in the summers and spring breaks and stuff like that. And then at one breakup when I want to say 18, he moved down here to get better and better his life or whatever. I had never stepped foot in the state of Florida. We didn't really do cool vacations when I was a kid. So he had me come here for a weekend and wooed me and made it feel like, oh, this is the best thing in the world. So I was like, okay, screw it, I'll move down. So I moved down to Florida for a boy. And then obviously that didn't work out. So I wound up just like taking a paycheck. I mean, I was 19, 20. I stayed down here for like 10 months actually, that there's a piece of that puzzle that is missing. I stayed down here for about 10 months and then said, this is such a culture shock. It's not going to work with him. I'm going to go back home. So I went back home. I went back to Indiana for about 6 months, stayed with my parents, and that was, I love my parents, but that was hell. And then he kind of like reeled me back in. So I moved back down to Florida, and that didn't last long. I stayed with him he bought a condo in that time frame and stuff. So I lived with him and then knew that the same issues that were there before are still there. So I literally took like a whole paycheck and like put it in an apartment and moved into an apartment with nothing, no furniture, just me and my clothes. I didn't even have like pillow, blanket, nothing. And I just built my way up from there by myself. I literally like went to like rent a center. Like, can I rent to own a couch just so I have something to sleep on and have something in my apartment? And then I remember my parents came down the first time when I had my little one bedroom apartment. It was just this little guy. And they're like, Rachel, you don't have any steak knives. And I was like, you're lucky I have a fork. So it was just, I mean, I started over by myself across the country and had nothing. It
I think
was,
it's so parenty too, because it's like your
yeah,
parents come over to your apartment you've worked your ass off for. And they're like, you don't have any steak knives. It's like, who the hell's buying steak in this apartment? Like, I'm eating ramen noodles
I don't need
and
a-
bologna.
right,
I
right,
don't need a steak knife.
facts. Yep.
Do you think that so what's interesting to me is what little bit I know of you, and I think it's come through a little bit, maybe some on this your personality wise, but was some of your drive, are you stubborn? Would you consider yourself a stubborn person?
1,000%. Yeah.
And what I
What do
find
you
fascinating is, go ahead, Ed. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just there's definitely some good traits to I guess I was trying to think if I'd consider myself stubborn or not. I guess there's some good aspects of that too, right?
Mhm.
To be stubborn for positive things, but I don't know.
Oh, I definitely don't mean it negatively. What I mean is
Yeah.
stubborn. What I was gonna, yeah, I'm with you. Good point. I was more leaning on the ideas by stubborn. I mean that you saw that and you're like, well, I'm not gonna quit. I'm just gonna keep going. Like you're gonna
Right.
power through. Is that sort of the mentality? Like, okay.
Yep.
So then let me ask you now as an adult that's had a career, and there's more to go. I'm not done. But as an adult, what when you look at challenges as a parent or even as an adult now, what's your stance on failure? What is your take on failure?
I First off, I hate failure. Like I hate it. Like I even get fidgety just thinking about it. But I think anytime I felt like I failed, I had to twist my mind to think, what did I learn? Right? Obviously, everyone's going to fail at something, but I turn it into what lesson did I learn rather than I failed. Let me just give up and be down in the dumps. I don't want to do that. So I just think of what I learned. Moving across the country as a teenager, uh, I'm so grateful for it now, but there was a lot of failures along the way. There still are. I mean, of course, there always it will be, but I learned so much that now I'm so independent. Like, I dare you to like try. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need someone else to. Everyone needs help at times, but I will get through things on my own, no matter how hard they are, because I've done it. I did not have all the help. I didn't really have any help. It was me. I did it by myself. No one foot the bill. No one did any of that. It was me. So I think it builds strength. I think failures build more strength and you learn a lot.
I've always been I'm obsessed with it. I think it's the greatest teacher in the world. As long as um if it's not yourself, and some people me included, I needed reinforcement from time to time until I learned how to process it. You in your case, you had to learn how to process it solo. I was fortunate to have, a few people, a few mentors in my life, and I'm sure you did too, but I had a few mentors, my grandfather being one of them, that I would fail, and then yeah, my parents might rip me a new one, but then my grandfather would be like, let me give you the other perspective. And like he was always, so I had an interpreter of that failure. And but that's, I think it's the best learning tool in the world. When now that you've gone through that, I did that drive you from college into your career path? Because to get to where you're at now is um and I don't know enough about like gender dynamics in terms of like the discrepancy between male and female, but in my business relationships, the majority of CFOs and people I run into happen to be males. Um, and it seems to be male bias, and it seems to be that financial stuff is very much in that, which means, sorry, I get gooses because I think about your story. That means that all that crazy, pardon the strong word, shit that you went through probably gave you a little bit of armor to then walk in, because your accounting background is, pardon the strong word, fucking impressive. Can you talk to like, can you talk about this whole process? Like, how do you go from 19-year-old kid going to Florida Atlantic to standing toe to toe with giants? Like, how do you get to that point?
Well, the part of the story that I probably won't cover in this, but is good to mention, is the part before I moved to Florida. There very, 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 very many things that occurred that made me a strong person to even do that stuff. There's a lot of traumas back there. There's a lot of things that I went through that some people would have went down a very dark path because of the things that happened, and I refuse to be that like statistic and that person. So I've always pushed myself and try to be like I, I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to ever be better than anyone because I don't like that term, but I wanted to try to be successful and not have someone else to say, "Oh, you're only that because of me." I wanted to feel that myself. I wanted to feel that I was proud of myself. If no one ever told me I was that they were proud of me, it was okay because I was going to be proud of me. So I also have, I don't know, I'm very outgoing. Obviously, you guys know that. But I'm very outgoing, and I always like communication was so huge to me. So I always communicated what I wanted. I always had goals, and I just kept pushing to reach them, and I never let anyone, and of course past traumas, of course, I never let anyone back me into a corner and make me feel like I couldn't do something. Like it was like I dare you kind of thing. So that drive is just in me. It never went away, and I'm still going, yeah, all this time. Like, let's just keep pushing.
Hmm. I wonder how much of driving, because I've been thinking about the stubborn word a lot since that word was said, because I think it's interesting too, and for me personally, Rachel, and not giving you crap or anything, but like I think Drew had asked you, would you consider yourself a stubborn person or whatever, and you were like, yes, it seemed, and I've really never I've never thought about that word, applying that to myself, whether or not I would be that. And I'm not sure why I've never thought about that. You guys know me. I'm curious, would you say I'm curious to ask Taylor, she's here, but she's not on here right now. It's like, Taylor, am I a stubborn person? Because she would probably know best, but I don't know exactly. Honestly, I know what it means, but I don't really understand it. And I think that's okay too.
Well, I mean, in my stubborn could be good and bad in all reality. So stubborn bad means you're just like you don't want to cooperate with people. That kind of way. I think that's the negative side of it. But I think being stubborn in a positive sense is your drive, not letting someone back you down. Ed, and I'll be honest with you, and this is a compliment, but I think like with your art, for example, I think you're stubborn because you're picky and you
Oh,
want things the way you are. And when you wipe a whole canvas, you're stubborn into accepting the fact that, hey, this is beautiful. Someone will love it. Right. So I think stubborn can be different, almost a different meaning depending on the situation and how you are. I think everyone has some kind of stubborn. It's just unfortunate that some people's stubborn is a negative light and then some is positive. I'm
well, and it,
stubborn, and now I think my parents will say, well, actually, she's, you know, very stubborn, and I probably argue. I mean, I'm not saying probably. I did argue back a lot. Like my dad always said, you're going to be a lawyer. I was very stubborn in that sense, and I guess my parents would probably say that's negative, but it was also my strength coming through too, like to push forward. So that could be a negative too, but I've always been very stubborn, and it could go both ways.
That's a pretty positive. So I just had this realization. I am terribly stubborn with creative things, and I've never assigned that word to it. And you guys know how I am and my anxiety with my music, or how particular I
Mhm.
am. And Drew knows too, because he's got to wait on me occasionally for some stuff. But the thank you for saying that, because I've never and I really mean it too. It's like, how cool is the world when we all know what that word means, maybe, but how cool is I would have never applied that word to myself, probably, or never really thought of it until. And it's funny too, Rachel, knowing you and not giving you crap again. But if somebody's like, would you say Rachel's stubborn? I'd be like, oh hell yeah. And I think I mean that in a good way, because you have a stubborn perseverance, about you. And I think that's good. And it can, I know my being stubborn with my painting or my music can be good to a point and then put me in a really bad place too. So you can overdo the good part too. So
I think one thing that's really crucial. I have to be stubborn from time to time, and I am. But I mean, I have to be stubborn at work, creatively. I think that the real crucial section to it is that we have to consider how we communicate when we're being stubborn. If we know we're a stubborn personality, see, Rachel knows, we have to consider how we communicate, because that's what's going to shift a lot of people's perspectives of. So I have spoken enough to Rachel, or feel like I have, that I understand that she's stubborn towards giving up. She's stubborn to quitting. She's stubborn towards walking away from something without a fight. Like, she's going to put in the effort. I don't mean like anything negative. I just mean put in the effort. She's going to do that. And then she'll look at it and be like, I've exhausted all effort, and maybe move on. Fair statement? I don't know. But that's what I would assume.
Yeah.
It's the same way with Ed's creativity. I envy that. I don't have that. Like, I can compromise my creativity because I can look at it from my left brain and right brain fight a lot. And I can look at it from the money standpoint. I wish I was more stubborn creatively, because I think when you are stubborn from a creative perspective, the danger is what you said, perfectionism. Perfectionism will murder you. Like, it will destroy your entire art. But you have to be stubborn enough to care about it to get it to that point. And then sometimes I think the universe, God, whatever you choose to believe in, brings people into your life that are the opposite of stubborn. They're just full chaos. And they're the ones that rip it out of your hands and make you go to that next. If you are stuck,
Mhm.
those are the people, and you have to look for them. You have to look for the signs, but those are the people that push you through that next bit, and whoever it may be. Did you have people in your life, since we're talking on the stubborn side, did you have anybody in your life that was like that person that pulls, that frequently you're a horse riding along being stubborn and they just pull the reins back on you? Do you have anybody like that, Rachel?
Like, that tried to make me not be so stubborn.
Or
Um,
that makes you wake up and be like, whoa, maybe I'm going down not the wrong path, like a a negative one, but like maybe you're not listening to reason well enough? Or do you have anybody that like challenges you in that capacity?
not really.
Ooh, that sounds like
wow.
challenge accepted.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I feel that, and I'm not going to say anything negative about anyone, but I just feel like I have a lot of people in my life. Now, do I have friends and stuff that challenge? Yeah. I have a friend that is coming to mind right away that sh- two of them, they're like, Rachel, stop. You're getting ahead of yourself. You know what I mean? Like, let's tone it down and think of these things. So I have friends that do that, but I don't think that I necessarily had, like, growing up. Like, I don't think I had, it was just like a knockdown rather than, hey, let's talk this out. That communication wasn't there. It was just kind of like, stop. It wasn't a positive push, I guess you could say.
But arguably, I guess I'm weird this way. Arguably, though, that same the lack of that gentle approach probably shaped you to to
Mhm.
put you in a better position down the road. Would you? Is that a fair statement? I'm asking. That's a question mark.
Yeah, and I think some of the way things were handled, like, I wanted to be the opposite of that. You know what I mean? So I wanted to push to do things differently for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's always interesting too. I think with parents too, you said earlier, it's like there was a time where I lived with my parents too, and it sucked. I mean, it was great at some points, as an adult, but other times it's like their thermostat. I don't even know if the thing worked, but it was so effing hot in that house. I'm like, how are you guys not melting into the couch? And I actually started disliking my parents based on, I was like, I don't understand. And I presented the science of like what temperature you should sleep at and how it's better for your system and everything. In this regard, forget the science, Ed. We're going to keep it a balmy 95 degrees in the house tonight.
Mhm.
And it's like your Werther's originals are going to melt if we continue this. So sorry, mom, dad. I know you're not. You're probably not here anyways. Probably melting in your foyer. I don't even know what a foyer is. I just like to say it.
Yeah, I think we all hit those. I mean, the interesting thing to me is, as my parents, I'm blessed right now that both my parents are still with me, but the fact that as they've aged, they've gotten more and more stubborn, in the sense of, like, my dad called right before we went live, and he was like, "Hey, I'm sorry, the printer's not working." And I was like, "Okay, well, let me." He was like, "I wasn't on iPhone, and this is a Rachel joke. I was an Android user, and now I'm an iPhone user, and iPhones do print easier than Androids, I promise." But I was trying to walk him through how to print, and my dad refuses to update his phone, so he's like 3 operating systems back. So the buttons have changed, and he starts arguing with me, but that's not how it's supposed to be. And I was like, "That's not reality. You got to deal with reality." It's like, as soon as I'm done doing what I'm doing, I'll come by the house, I'll fix your printer, and he argues again. And so then I get frustrated because I'm like, here I am I'm working. No one even bothered to call and ask me if I was working. So that same wall just builds up. And finally, I mean, he hung up on me. He was so mad over a printer, over nothing. But I think it's
so
because
he's
like
projecting his printer issues. He's projecting that
100%.
printer queue onto you. And wow.
It's just a reminder that sometimes like I try and take those things like, so my biggest thing about being stubborn is I look at, I notice that the older I get, the more stubborn I get. So I try and constantly check myself to remind myself of like, okay, I can be stubborn. I can be conscious of it, but I don't want to be closed to it. Because if you get closed to something, that's when suddenly, to me, something ferments in the wrong direction. And that's when bitterness comes out. And as soon as bitterness is
Right.
awful because once it's there, it's there. You shift it. Now, as a parent now,
That changed everything. Yep.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. So did you find that, all right, so you're moving along life, you're strong, you're independent, you're kicking ass, you're kicking indoors, you're doing your thing, and then you have a kid, and those things still exist. I imagine they don't go away. I don't know the female experience, obviously. So did you find that there was like a new level unlocked, or did you lean back into those even more? Like what happens when you have a kid? How did your perspective shift at all?
Yes. I mean, I think yeah, new level unlocked for sure. First off, I want my kid to have the strength that I worked very hard to have, right? I want him to have that, and I want to teach him those lessons right away. But I also have to tone down where I'm at because now you're dealing with just a little guy, you know what I mean? So he needs guidance, and you can't be as stubborn. Like you have to knock down some walls to work together now, you know? Um, so I think it changed in multiple different ways. Like I want him to be the same way as me, but I'll tell you the truth. And my parents laugh and they say, "Oh, yeah, that's your kid," because my kid is very stubborn like me, and he also is a very strong personality. So there's times I mean, we're close as close can be. Like we get along so good, and we really, really have like a lot of the same interests and everything. But he can frustrate me because he's stubborn and he's argumentative just like I am. So being a strong person and then dealing with that, like that's your kid, that it unlocks a new level of, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with myself in a boy version. What the hell? So it's I
So
love
this
the
is
kid.
interesting. I want to say this too because I'm looking up the definition of stubborn, and I think this is interesting. And I was curious what the opposite, is according to Mr. Merriam-Webster. But no, there's 4 definitions that it has here, and I think this is really, really interesting. I'm like doing a producer type thing here. Look at me go! Well done, Ed.
should go.
So definition 1, unreasonably or perversely unyielding, justifiably unyielding. The 4th one's the most interesting, but number 2, performed or carried on in an unyielding, obstinate, or persistent manner. Number 3, difficult to handle, manage, or treat. Number 4, and it's one word, lasting.
There it is.
And that is nuts to me. Like that's nuts. It's like stubborn. That's like lasting. And I think that's crazy to me.
But
It's a way
consider
cooler
the
word than you thought.
say it again, Rachel. I'm sorry.
I said it's a way cooler word than you thought.
Yeah. I never really thought about it.
But if you take into account, if we're using Rachel's story as an example here, if you take into account the adversity that you went through challenges, obviously some back in the day that were more traumatic than others. But even if we take more common in the sense of like boy meets girl, or person meets person, person moves across country for a person, doesn't work out. We hear that story a lot. Like, that's a lot. But even with that, your stubbornness, your lasting, you powered through. You lasted. That didn't defeat you. You just kept going. You changed and grew with it. I just think it's a fascinating testament. And that's why I love asking people their stories. I haven't experienced that. Like, I'm too afraid to do that. Like, and I'm a risk taker, but that was a risk that I wouldn't take for whatever reason. I think it's selfish in reality why I wouldn't, but that's a risk I wouldn't take.
What a
I mean, in some
great,
ways, good.
yeah, no, I think this is, I'm just like learning so much right now, and I'm happy to be here because I'm like thinking about everything so differently right now, especially looking, and I mean it, like looking at the antonyms of it too, where I'm seeing, I wouldn't consider myself like personally stubborn, but I in certain areas I would, but I also see the negatives of the opposite of I'm sometimes too compliant and too kind and too nice, and I don't take care of myself, and that's a bad thing. Rachel knows this, and Drew, you know this too. But I've worked with a lot of CFOs and loved most of them. But I've done that, and what a great, and I think, well, I think a great person having a role like that is somebody that is stubborn in ways. And it's always nice to find a CFO that's stubborn, and you have a duty. You know, it's a fiduciary duty to do this, but finding those that can understand that side, and the numbers are numbers, and we have to do this, and this is what we have to do. And then finding those CFOs, those accountants with they got to have a little heart too, or at work, it helps, you know?
Mhm.
So
That's what I was
yeah.
literally about to ask is, have you found yourself in a spot? Obviously, we don't want to talk about clients because that's bad juju. But have
Yeah.
you found yourself in a spot where, on paper, because I deal with this constantly with the president of my company, I'm the heart, she's the hammer. Have you found where it's like on paper it doesn't make sense for us to for this person for this client to proceed this way, but the reality of it is, do you ever find yourself at conflict with heart versus fiscal, where you're looking at numbers and you're looking at the heart? Have
Yeah.
you found yourself?
100%. Especially because I mean, and Ed said something about how, the kindness. Like I'm really big on that. I would give you the shirt off my back. I would give you more than even if I didn't have it. I'm huge on that. So I always get like a heart with it. And it's the same thing being like a manager, managing employees or your clients. You're supposed to kind of like be in charge, but my heart gets involved a lot too. So I always think like outside of the box of the norm. Like, well, how are they going to feel? How is this going to affect them? It's hard for me to just see only the numbers because that personable stuff is there, and it gets me like in my feels. I always care. Like I have a client that no longer uses our service, but I thought of something that could help their business, and I'm like, maybe I should reach out to them. They got rid of my consulting firm in that work, but I still think about them like, ooh, this tip may help grow their business. Maybe I should reach out. I don't need to do that. Like it should have just been like door shut, go on. But I just have a heart. Like I want other people to be successful. I want other people to experience like the good things. You know what I mean? And feel that success. So it's difficult. There are a lot of accountants that just like numbers plug away, and they don't have that. Um, I feel like I'm not that typical accountant. I don't think so.
Well, and my favorite, it's funny too, because my favorite accountants, and I think the best accountants that I've ever worked with, and I'm not just saying from a personal standpoint, but actual real results, commonality that I found with a lot of the ones that I absolutely love and adore and have enjoyed working with, is they do a hell of a lot job. A hell of a lot better job. Well spoken, Ed. Well done. You almost had a complete thought without screwing the sentence up. But they did such an amazing job of taking care of their job for who they were taking care of it for. And they're like, oh, how are your personal, ask a good accountant with a good heart how their personal finances are going. And it's like, oh, I don't even look at my own stuff. I spend all day and spend all night working on your stuff. And it's like over here, it's like, oh, I just, I'm buying stuff I don't need to. And if I use my own work for myself, I might be able to be in a better situation. So I think that's interesting too.
One of the things, and we don't have to go too far into it, but one of the things, if when you start doing the comparative game in career paths and all this stuff, one of the things I thought was interesting, you worked for one of the big four, right? Right.
Yep.
So anybody, yeah. So anybody that is in college or has a kid in college or knows anything about this, like working for the big fours, it's sold as a big deal and it's a big thing. I'm not knocking it. I'm only going by what I know from having a couple of accounting clients and they're telling me stories. So obviously they might be a little biased, but the point is like working for the big four is a big deal. It's a huge badge of honor. It's a great thing. But then there's something else about being outside of that space and being on your own. Is there not a definitive answer? Cause I don't think that's the right way, because it's all part of your journey, but is there, looking back, is there a big contrast between the big four and what you do now? Like, is there something where there's like, are you allowed, though you have the prestige of this big company, is it more impersonal versus a smaller consulting firm where you can be way more personable? Is there something from that you see as a bitter advantage over another? Or?
It's weird. I enjoyed working for the big four, one of the big four, to be truthful. But it's weird that since I did, the label that sticks with you, right? So everyone's like, "Oh, you worked there?" I'm like, "Yeah." And even the comparisons the statistics that they tell you on getting in there, it's harder to get in here than it is to get into the Harvard, like for college. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm not that, I'm smart, but like that, it's a little much. So it's like this thing that sticks with you. Um, and it's interesting to see how when you go from that and like that mindset of like, this is where I'm at, to like a small consulting firm, that little piece of the puzzle still sticks with you. Like people start looking up your professional network, like, LinkedIn and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, you worked here." I'm like, "Yeah, but that doesn't change me as a person." Like, so I think that that label sticks with you, but the personal touch you can have in a smaller, in a smaller firm and like with clients, it's a lot different. With Deloitte, one of the big four, you're working with so many people that I probably worked on stuff I never even talked to the client, right? I'm working, and there's like 280,000 people that work there. There were so many hands in the pot. You have no idea who all is working on stuff. Now, I work with my small team. I talk to them every day. Like you get so much more personal connection in a smaller firm than you do a large one, for sure. And I'm big on that.
I was going to say, do you feel like that again, looking back, do you feel like life experience gave you advantages to being able to handle the stuff at Deloitte and then being able to jump over and be on the smaller side? Do you feel like life experience prepped you for that, or is that something you had to just learn in the moment?
Um, I think a little bit of both. I mean, truthfully, I feel like the way I was, like life pushed me to just keep pushing and keep going as hard as you can. But at the same time, that personal side too, that was great. But the way I am personally, like where I want to help people and I want to, have that personal connection, also led me this way too. So it's like both sides of me, almost like both sides of my personality. Not both sides. I have one, but you know what I mean? Like both big, strong characteristics that I have, like kind of divided me that way.
Is there anybody that like you're a complete that you'd be comfortable that you're a complete pushover with, like a niece or a nephew, or like uh I've had kids throughout my life or my nephews or whatever, where it's Uncle Ed or whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, you can have, is there anybody like that in your life that like, oh my gosh.
Uh, I mean, well, I think kids in general, like I always want them to be happy. Like I always want them to feel good. You know, my son, am I a pushover for him? Yeah, I am. I do think I am. First off, he's the only kid. I wasn't supposed to be able to have kids, so he's like my miracle, right? Um, and we have such a bond. So am I a pushover to my kid? On occasion. Stubborn versus stubborn and strong personality. Sometimes I'm like, ooh, I gotta walk away. So he can con me out of things that I wish he couldn't. And then just like my friends that are family now, you know, I live in Florida by myself. There's no family here. There's nobody. So friends that are family. I mean, I'm a godmother to my friend's baby, and he's only a year and a half old. Am I a pushover to like, yeah, he's the cutest little thing. And her kids, like I always want to bring them like, you know, a cake pop from Starbucks, whatever. Like I'm a pushover for children because I just want them to feel good. Like I want them to feel kindness and I want them to remember the good things, not all the bad. So just for kids in general, I feel like I'm a pushover.
I
Yeah,
just think
me
about
too.
that I just think about that core memory creator. I think you guys, I think all of us do. Um, but I think it's the concept of I remember what went right and wrong in my life as a kid, and I try and do the opposite of that as best I can. And then that movie Inside Out comes out, and I'm like, oh, I want to help make a core memory for every kid possible. Let's a good one. I want to make a good one. I don't want to be the guy that
Right.
takes their candy away. I want to be the guy that's like, let's make a fun, you know. So it's always something, which I think is interesting. Oh, dude, I could so segue right now, but I won't. I think it. I think it's. I
Now
think it's
you
interesting.
can't do that to me. I'm a
I know, like,
35-year-old child. It's like I want to
No, no, I was
segue. Now
saying.
I'm gonna be like, what's the segue
Okay,
gonna
okay,
be?
okay. Well,
Okay.
all right. Well, let me. I'm.
anymore.
I'm just gonna lead the show then, and you just follow along. You guys just play ball with me. I think it's interesting when we think about core memories because one of my core memories is when I think back to a lot of the TV shows and content I watched as a kid. One of those was Mr. Rogers. And now we've gone through and we've created this show. Rachel, have you seen the show?
Yes, of course. I saw it before
Uh,
anyone else did. Well, before a lot of people did.
yeah, you have a
Sneak
sneak
peek.
peek. But now I think it's very fascinating. I think that for a lot of people, Mr. Rogers was a core memory. And again, we are not trying to replace that core memory. But what we are doing is in my mind is saying, "Hey, remember that core memory? Here's our interpretation," right? So, the first person that invented a cheeseburger, nobody knows. I'm sure it's Duke of Cheese or Duke of Burger, or maybe it's Hamburg.
We're gonna
But
find
whoever it
out.
is, oh no. Whoever invented the first cheeseburger, it's not that every other cheeseburger is trying to steal his core memory. It's just that that's everyone
Right.
else's interpretation. I think that's really what's fun about the show. I think that's a really great thing. It's out now to shamelessly plug it. If you haven't seen it, you can go over to It's a Wonderful Day on YouTube. It is a
Oh
kid's show.
my gosh.
Oh no.
You guys are not gonna
Like, honestly,
believe.
what? Oh gosh. What
Okay.
is it, Ed?
I went to the google.com and I said, who invented the cheeseburger? The first result, and I'm going to clarify, Lionel Sternberger is reputed to have introduced the cheeseburger in 1924 at the age of 16.
16.
At the
There
age
you
of
go.
Jeez.
16, he was born for pattied greatness, like with the name like Sternberger. I wonder if maybe he changed his name at 16 because he wanted to call it the Stern. Oh, that original
Right.
Sternberger. It must have been really good.
There's all kinds of rumors. My point in bringing that up, though, is that it's fascinating this idea that down the road,
Mm.
that the first cheeseburger, I use it a lot, but I use food a lot because food generates a lot of core memories for me. But that whatever it is, whatever this moment was, in our case, we're not making something that's Mr. Rogers. We're making something that is a flavor of an interpretation, a moment, a reminder, nostalgique, whatever else you want to call it. It's an amuse bouche. It's all these different things. It's just a taste of something that's made for kids to do that. And so what I'd love to do is, with the last couple minutes we have, Rachel, is there anything that, as a parent now, life experience included, is there anything that you would say is, from your perspective, just a great piece of advice, which is what Mr. Rogers did? He gave us all great advice. Is there a great piece of advice you could throw out there that you would offer to somebody?
To a kid or just anybody?
I think to anybody. I think it applies. I think it's never too late to change. So whether you're a kid starting out or 98 and hear something new.
And I, of course, listen, all my interaction is with my son, so I just think of that because I try to teach him lessons that go with him later, not just now. You know, to me, you never know what someone's going through, so remember that always. I think that's just so important because you could come across someone that's just such an asshole, and they may have just had the worst thing happen to them, and you don't know. And that's something that I feel like I discuss daily. Um, in work meetings. I tell that to my employees. I tell that to my son at school. There may be a kid having behavior issues. I'm like, you don't know what's going on. You always give grace and just you never know what someone's going through. So show kindness no matter what.
Badass. Ed, you got anything to say to help wrap this puppy up?
Without looking at her, because I can't, well, I do it. I give her, she gives me a ton of crap, and it's not deserved because I am the most calm, mild mannered, pleasant, reliable, always on time person that you could imagine. I'm great, really, but no, I give Rachel so much crap. Rachel is part of our family now, and has been, and she is one of the kindest, most selfless people that I know, and I wouldn't have you 1% any other way. You are a perfect mix of a person, and I'm just, it's an honor to be here with you, and I mean that from my soul. And I'm not going to look at you, but I did want to look up a positive quote on stubbornness, and I think you can sometimes replace the word stubbornness with maybe Rachel. Stubbornness is the secret, and this kind of goes back to burgers too. So I'm wrapping everything together. Stubbornness is the secret sauce that transforms dreams into reality.
I love it.
That's perfect.
Yeah, so I thought it'd go off a little better than that. I spent a lot of, like everybody, it was kind of like crickets, okay? It was kind of, you want to...
I thought that was like emotional sink in. I was letting it just resonate, my man.
Yeah, I'll work on it, guys. You know, I'm a little stubborn with my you guys are being stubborn.
I don't think so. I think you're using that out of context. That's like Anchorman, When in Rome.
When in Rome, Haman
I feel like
Glavin.
by like the elbow, all the elbow movements, and the elbows are famous. So, you know.
He brings it up every
No,
single
listen,
freaking time I'm live, and I
and you know
wait
what's
for it. I'd
crazy?
miss it if it didn't happen.
Well, I listen, I give the most shit to the people I love the most. So, I mean, that should tell you a lot. And
You're in a
Drudo, that's his new name. If you didn't know, it's Drudo instead of just Drew.
Trudeau.
Um, yeah,
Aw.
it's Drudo.
Trudeau. What a
Um,
fun combination of words.
it's so cute. So that's all I call him now. Um, but I give shit to the people that I connect with the most. If I don't pick on you, there's probably a reason that I don't feel that connection. I think that's huge, and it's all love. Like that's just my way of showing love. Um, and Ed, you know, not just for me, and I can't talk about it too much because I'll cry, and you already know these things, but on both me and my son, we are so unbelievably grateful for your friendship. Um, to have someone that is probably so different than me in certain ways that is such an inspiration as at the same time, and especially for my son, I think that's huge. I always tell you that you're my favorite awkward human ever. And that's just the truth. And I just freaking love you.
I kind of want to rename this podcast to Favorite Awkward Humans. Think how good that
That
is.
is I've said that from like, I mean, I'm an OG like way back when he was just a weirdo in the garage. I mean, he still is, but you know, he's transformed a little. Um, but I've always said he's my most favorite awkward human because he's just a
It's
goofball.
perfect.
And my
Perfect.
kid just wants to do like the Napoleon Dynamite dance with him at some point. That's because
We
my
can
kid
do
is
that.
the awkward human. He wants to so bad.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up so we can close out based on time because that's what we have to do. Unfortunately, I'm going to be the numbers person and be stubborn about closing the show early. Ed, is there anything else you want to say? You have exactly 10 seconds.
Yeah, just a quick word from our sponsors. Did you guys hear that? Okay, exactly. Okay, so where are y'all at? I'm sorry.
Okay, well, if we are doing it, Riverside's up next. Come hang out with us. I'm sure you'll see Rachel in there. If not, then we'll see you next time we see you. Thank you for watching, listening, or whatever. Don't forget to what, Ed?
Oh, like, follow, subscribe. I was like, what am I forgetting? Don't forget to shower. Take care of you. I was like, don't forget to what? Don't forget to what? Like, follow, subscribe. Hit all the buttons, guys. Send it to your friends. Send it to your family. Send it to your worst enemy and say, you know what? I don't like you, but I think this show could bring us together. Not only that, but I do believe that this podcast, One More Good Thing, could change the world. The power is in the podcast. The power is in yourself. The power is in the secret sauce. Don't be too stubborn. Persevere. What is that? No, I was like thinking Space Trail. See you guys next time.
It's way more than 10 seconds.
Bye, Rachel.
Bye.
All right.